and it's great to connect with you all again. And over the next hour, we're going to talk about communication and everything that that means to us. I want to start by thanking Karen in particular for all her work, and John in the Show and Development Partnership, and DLDC, and Shauna, and everybody for inviting me to come along today. And I suppose one of the things that I want to start by saying is that I am and have been where you are. So for 20 years, I was a stay-at-home mum, and I was involved in the voluntary not-for-profit groups. And in 1991, that shows my age, I set up the first parent and toddler group in Newbridge, and it's still going to this day, which is I'm delighted about. And I'm also the PRO for Donegal Women in Business Network. I have a company called Evelyn McMarketing, as you can see, and basically what I do is a hands-on helping of companies with their communication and marketing and stuff like that. So I also have a blog called Donegal Mummy. I'm working on a little project called Donegal Giving. I'm an author and trainer and do lots of bits and pieces. But I very much believe that community is going to be the heart of rebuilding during this very uncertain time. And I think that we as a group are going to bring that new regrowth to Donegal. So I suppose I'm going to start off with saying that good communication is a bridge between confusion and clarity. And I suppose that's a good start, that we're all communicating. Even now today, you're looking at me, so there's a visual communication and you're listening. You might have pen and paper beside you to make notes, so you're going to be writing. So the good thing is that absolutely everybody can communicate. Just some people are better at it than others. Nobody's really bad at it, but some people are better than others, and some people work at it. Listening is a very, very important skill whenever in terms of communicating. So we'll be talking a little bit about that later. What we will be covering today is just to give you an idea of what's going to happen. So we have a break somewhere in between, and Karen will keep us on track for that. And we're going to cover areas such as the importance of communication to your community group, communication at a time of crisis. We're going to cover that within that. And then we're going to move on to the umbrella of exactly what you need to do in terms of putting a communication plan together, the importance of storytelling, setting smart goals, who is your target audience, and how to deliver your message and get results. Then we're going to talk about the different platforms that you use. And that is a very exciting thing for everybody, because I think, you know, as I say, this is Zoom, which has now become a huge communication platform all over the world. And definitely we'll be talking about that. And then the creativity and communication. The communication can be two people connecting, but also you can bring your own creativity into it. And in terms of your community groups, your social enterprises, what I would say is that the same rules apply offline, online, and in communication. So if you're sending an email to someone or you're communicating through WhatsApp, the same manners apply, the same good manners, good communication, and a good practice applies. So if you were to thank somebody offline, then you should equally thank them on in terms of communicating with them. And then we'll move on to collaboration building, relationship building in communication and networking. And as I said, I'm the PRO for Donegal Women in Business Network, and I'm an avid networker and have communicated with a few of you in the past. And I think that's something that's very, very important, again, in terms of growth and moving forward. And then we look at measurement, and is it really worth all the effort to communicate and to communicate with good practice and to communicate well? And so by the time we've done all that, hopefully, you will leave today with an interest and an understanding of what communication is. All of you have experienced it, all of you know it, but within it as well, we're going to have, I think, 7 challenges in total. They're very simple little challenges, and you can accept them or not. And really, they will help towards in your communication within your group and with your internal and your external communication. So internally is everything to do with your organization, externally is anybody outside of that. So we look again at that in a moment. So I am right, me too. So again, we will also have a little look at conflict and communication and how sometimes handling conflict with communication and the importance of how you communicate within conflict. As I said to Karen, something like that, and we will also touch upon fundraising and in terms of communication and social media and marketing. So they're all connected, and you'll see that today by the time we finish, that really they are all intertwined. So just going to move on now to what is communication. And I think in our lifetime, there has never been seen a better campaign of communication than what is happening within the government at the moment. I think it's just amazing. And if you look at their branding, the color, they've used yellow throughout, the red, they've given clear, concise messages. You know, all people are advised to reduce, keep a distance, do not, you know, they're very clear. They've underlined those, and I'm sure you've seen that everywhere. And then we in turn have carried that on in our communications. And what we've been doing. So as I say, in terms of best practice, clear messages, imagery, and asking people to do something that they need, getting their message across, the current government message is really fantastic. And also all of you will appreciate the branding. If you look at the bottom of this slide that I have up, in terms of normally when we're involved in looking for funding or putting ourselves out there, we have to use a lot of logos from a lot of providers. And I just think it was fantastic that their logo is there, but the most important thing is the message. And I think that is very refreshing. And certainly from somebody who loves communication, involved in communication, I think that that is best practice. And if you did nothing more than to actually look at what has been happening in terms of the message, I think we really have done a good job. I've also been watching CNN and Sky News and looking at how other countries are doing it, and I think that we've done a really good job on that. So the definition of communication is, or the areas of communication are face-to-face or personal communication, broadcast media communications, mobile communication channels, electronic communication channels, and written methods of communication. I mean, there's some serious communications going on in there. And also in terms of body language and how we can deliver a piece of communication to someone, both internally and externally. But if we don't bring our own personality or our own warmth to it, or the tone that we need to bring, then can be received as a totally different message. So that's pretty much all the areas that are covered in that. And I think, again, one of the things we need to do is to learn to be a great listener. So in terms of communication, sometimes we communicate to speak and not necessarily communicate to listen. So it's basically, we're all pretty much good at communication. It's just we have to perfect it a little bit more. So that's really best practice communication with what the government are doing, and also in terms of their color and their branding. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So in terms of communication at a time of crisis, it certainly is a time of crisis for everybody. And I think certainly in the first week, there was a paralysis. I certainly felt it, and I just didn't know what direction I was going to go in or how I was going to cope through all of this. I have 2 adult children in Dublin, 1 here, and it was very scary. So I suppose even as a marketing consultant and as a communicator, I was frozen initially. But I think then the things that we really need to be aware of, and in terms of your social enterprises and your community groups, and I certainly have spoke to a lot of you in that area, and it is what should we be doing? How should we be communicating? The one thing that I would say to everybody is remain visible, whether you're a social enterprise, a business, a community group, a charity, whatever it is, that you still need to be there. If you take, for example, I'll pick a fictitious social enterprise community group. So if you are part of your community and you've been providing a service and a personality and a brand and a warmth to your community, and suddenly you're gone and not part of that, and every connection that they had with you, they're going to miss you. So suddenly they walk past your door, they can't go in. It might have a childcare facility, a gym, a social enterprise where they were buying product. You might be delivering something online from your social enterprise. there could be bingo and youth groups and all of that. And suddenly there's a sadness, the heartbeat of the community is gone. And so what the important thing is that you don't stop now that we have this amazing opportunity online to actually stop communicating. So the first thing I would say to you is remain visible. Share other messages. And again, we spoke about the government message and in terms of stay at home, you know, so literally, and that's what a lot of people are doing, is they're sharing great content and information from other people. And definitely the government message is something that we all should be sharing. And organizations such as DLDC, Initial Development Partnership, and you know, lots of great organizations in Donegal, Chef Aid, great community and voluntary organizations. Now is the time to support each other and share messages from each other. Use the correct tone, and I spoke about that a little bit earlier. So in terms of, if I suddenly was like this, and my voice went very boring, the message that I'm giving is not going to be received well. And I think the important thing within a time of crisis is that your voice is knowledgeable, clear, concise, that there's no sort of following a different path of thinking, and that you stick to what the facts are. And also that the tone is, it's a professional, positive tone, and that you don't maybe get caught into the whole, you know, it's terrible and everything's awful and we're never going to get out of this, because that's not helpful from an organization or to your community or to your people. Calm and positive. And sometimes I think, you know, the important thing is to try, number one, to be calm and positive. But within my business as well, sometimes it's not always you're natural to be that in some, when there's a crisis going on. So I suppose as a community group, your communication and communicating together on what it is, the message that you're putting out there. Do not be seen to benefit and do not sell. And I've been speaking to a lot of social enterprises and groups and organizations about this. The thing is that the important thing is that's also that cash flow is important if you're a social enterprise. So people say to me, well, you know, I have to make money. And absolutely, I think week one was the paralysis of people's thoughts. Week two is like an acceptance. And I think now people are actually ready to buy and to see what it is that they need, because we all need a certain amount of things while we're here. Certainly, you know, apart from groceries, you know, a lot of people are talking about painting and things like that. So it's like, and your groups that come, your childcare groups, maybe that come to your center, your gym, or the elderly or the youth clubs. So certainly there might be something that they actually do require to buy, but it's not during a time of crisis to be seen as benefiting where necessary. And if certainly there is something that they can get from you for free, then you should give it. As I say, I've been offering since this happened consultations for free, because it's my way of keeping visible, and it is my way of building relationships with communities and with businesses throughout Donegal. Keep people informed of what you are doing. And again, that comes back to being visible, you know, so tell them how you feel insofar as, you know, I don't know what day of the week it is, or, you know, you could post on social media or on a video, you know, basically what your plan is, what you're doing, and keep them informed of that you are looking forward to seeing them again. So communicating the fact that they are important to you, because you certainly are important to them. And ask how they are. So, you know, it's a two-way communication in terms of your communications out there, is let people know that you actually miss them and that you're looking forward to a time when we can get back to what the new normal is. Stick to the facts. And again, that comes back to what I said earlier. It's important that we don't over dramatize anything, and that we stick to the facts, and that, you know, certainly there are it's a very uncertain time and a very sad time in our communities, and it's important that we're just there for people. So engage with the community, share community initiatives, ask for volunteers, and that's something in terms of, again, social enterprises and community groups, you will want to ask volunteers to get in touch with you, or you will ask them to support your initiatives or your local communities. And certainly there is, Donegal County Council have got their call of action for to coordinate community groups, and you know, in terms of what you are doing, just put that out there in the same way as that you normally would put any message out, that you're doing X and that you're looking for volunteers, and then obviously adhering to all the directives and best practices that are needed at the moment. So I suppose really that's the overall thing in terms of communication in a time of crisis. As we go on throughout this morning, communication either in a time of crisis or not, the same rules apply. But these are certain topics that, or tips that I would say that it is. So it's to remain visible, just deal with the facts, try and be positive with your community, and just be aware how much they miss you as much as you miss them. It's also a time to take time and take stock and to move on with other things that you can do. And that's, so as I said, in terms of community example, what if you are an organization that has a social enterprise, or as I say, a childcare facility, a gym, youth clubs, elderly, whatever it is, now is the time as well that you can take stock and take time to think about what it is going forward that your group or organization can change or do. So challenge 1. So I just want you, if you have a pen and paper, maybe you can write these down, but certainly the slides will be available as well to you afterwards. So as part of this today, we have 7 challenges in here, so that maybe that you would just look at what you're doing both now in terms of crisis or afterwards. And the first challenge is look at what you're doing now and what changes can you make. So if you are currently putting out communications, are you aware of the guidelines regarding communication in a time of crisis? And is it something that you've thought about? And I'm sure many of you have, you know, you're great community advocates, and you know the heartbeat of your community better than anybody. So you're sensitive to that and you're aware of what you're doing. So I'm sure this is not anything new to any of you. But so any of you that, you know, want to take a moment today, later on, or over the weekend or whatever, what are you doing and how can you change that? And as we go through this morning, we'll be looking at the ways to communicate. The biggest communication problem is we do not listen to understand, we listen to reply. And that's something I mentioned earlier in terms of just that it's important to actually listen. So we're going to move on now to planning. And I know a lot of you, like myself, that are involved in community and not-for-profit and really busy in our normal lives before this has happened. You're out at work, you come home in the evening, you might have to squeeze in 2 meetings, and you have loads of things to do, and life is very busy. So sometimes when life is very busy, we're not inclined to sit down and take time to plan, because we think that, well, it's going to happen anyway, and sure, what's the point, you know, whatever. So there's 2 schools of thought at the minute. You hopefully have more time, so what's the harm? Also, when somebody talks about making a communication plan or a marketing plan, there is suddenly this heavy thought that it has to be something very corporate, very big. Tear a page from an A4 or a copybook from or whatever and just sit down and scribble it out or type it up into your phone or whatever. It is only as important as it is to you, how it looks. It is more important to actually put down some thoughts on some form of a paper or digital that you may, so that you can actually start thinking about it rather than worrying about this being the perfect plan. And I think that's one of the things, again, that the World Health Organization, there was a fantastic statement made, said, you know, the time for perfection is not now. So in terms of you have the opportunity and the permission to sit down and just write out a plan on a piece of paper and make it as simple or as basic as you can. So in terms of creating your own communication plan, and we've kind of agreed now it's going to be simple and it doesn't have to be complicated, but if you like complicated and detail and lots of corporate words in it, then that you should also do that. A plan can be short or long term, helping you map out how to raise your profile and refine your image in the community over time. And that's the thing, over time. So you now have the opportunity to sit down and say, you know, short term, 2 or 3 months, what are we going to do? long term, what's the plan? Now, there are a certain amount of unknowns. For example, you can't go and plan a great big fundraising event for July because you don't know what's going to happen, or August, or maybe even September. We don't know. But maybe there's other creative and innovative ways that you can plan your communication, your marketing, your fundraising. And again, the communication comes into all of those things. So fundraising and event management and all of that. And those are all topics for another day, but we'll dip in and out of them as we go along. A plan will make your communication efforts more efficient, effective, and lasting. And a plan will make it possible to target your communication accurately, and it gives you a structure to determine whom you need to reach and how. And we will talk about that later on in terms of who and what the message is. And again, going back to what the government are doing at the moment, the amount of stakeholders, people they need to get this message across to is massive. So from the newborn baby right through to the elderly and everybody in between, they have a message for them. And so just like you will have to get out your message to a number of people. A plan makes everything easier. If you spend some time planning at the beginning of an effort, you can save a great deal of time later on because you know exactly what you should be doing at any point. So challenge 2, in terms of a short-term plan challenge, commit to write a simple communication plan. And as we go on, we will be telling you the things that should be in it. But again, just, you know, if you challenge yourself to do that as individuals at this stage and then come together on a Zoom or as a communication group afterwards, it's something that suddenly if you challenge yourself to do it, you might be more inclined to do it. So I hope everybody's doing okay, and I think it's all going very well. Nobody heckling me yet, so that's good. And I hope you're all getting something out of it. And there'll be opportunities then to talk, to ask questions when we get to the first coffee break. So who are we? And I think that's something that's very important. Before we start communicating with anyone, we have to actually know who we are as people if we're communicating, and what our values are and what our opinions are and what we think. But as a community group, as a social enterprise, as a charity, as an organization, not for profit, we also have to know who we are. We have to have a vision for what's going to happen tomorrow and in the future. And we have to have a mission to make sure that we know what we're doing now. And again, the same rules apply in business, social enterprise, community groups. These are just continual things that carries on. So in terms of a story, when I normally go to talk to a group of people, I usually start the story. I kind of missed it a bit today. And I start off and I say, you know, my name is Evelyn McGlynn. I was a stay-at-home mum for 20 years. And when my kids grew up and left home, I was totally empty nest, didn't know what I was going to do. And my daughter said, Mum, we're not responsible for your happiness. You need to go and get a life. And it was the best advice I was ever given, because that's exactly what I did. So in terms of, it frames a conversation, it starts in terms of communicating with somebody. So definitely you need a story. So how do you start writing that story? Again, in terms of communication with your team and with your committee and with everyone who is involved at an organizational level in your organization. And Pixar, and we're all familiar with the movies, Toy Story, and all of Disney and everybody, they have a model. And it's once upon a time there was, every day, one day, because of that, and finally. So basically, if you stick to those guidelines to write your story, once upon a time, there was a group of people who got together in X town and set up a local community group that did Y. And that was 20 years ago, and now we're celebrating our 20th anniversary. In the meantime, every day we provide services to the local community. We have a childcare facility, we have a local gym, and we have a community group that supports the elderly, youth groups. And recently we won an award for X, and because of that we were on Y, and finally, here we are today, and this is what we're going through, and now we're communicating with you at a time of crisis. So the important thing is that you actually take time to look at and value the story that you have to tell, And whether you're a new social enterprise or one that has been going for a long time. And just in terms of, you know, I don't particularly want to call out anybody here, but Joanne is a member of Donegal Women in Business Network and from the Organic Gardens. And in terms of telling the story at the moment, what she's doing with her live gardens, live gardening twice a week, and what she's doing, she's building a story. So after this is all over, as part of her story, she'll be able to say, do you know what, during the coronavirus in 2020, we started doing live video, and it was the most scary thing in the world to actually communicate with people by video, but it was the basis for building the new relationship that I have with my customers. So I think that's pretty much it as regards story. And afterwards, I will be available to, by email or whatever, to contact as regards that, to talk about your story and what, you know, the beginning, the middle, and the end are, of course, not the end, the ongoing story. So challenge 3, here you go, write your story. So again, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be, if you start gathering together, and many of you already have that, the details of where your group began or your social enterprise began, and just what you're about, what's your vision for the future and your mission at the moment. And just by taking some time to getting that story, that is the anchor in terms of who you are and in terms of moving forward for the next part. So then as part of the plan, you've got your story, that's great. You have thought about where you are and who you are. So the next thing is you need to set some goals, and you need to make sure that they're SMART goals. And what a SMART goal is, and I'm sure again that you've used this and seen this before, they're specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And I suppose the first thing is, so just to give you some examples. So say, for example, that as an organization, back to our fictitious community center in any town, and say you've got a gym and you have a number of people using that gym every day, and you have a childcare facility, and you've got parents, mums, dads, grannies, granddads coming in with the children every day. And then you've got an enterprise, and maybe you're selling online and all of those things. So say, for example, you took one thing and you said, okay, I'm not sending out any communication by email to these people, to all the community members that use my facilities and our social enterprise and our community group. So specifically to say, I am going to start sending out emails, it's not really specific. It would be, so as part of the goal would be before, so the first thing would be, I am going to send out, I am going to gather the emails of the childcare parents so that I have them, and I'm going to work on that first. And of course, I would say that anybody is thinking about email, and we'll talk about that when we get to platforms, is to stay within the guidelines of GDPR. And so that's specific. So that's great. Okay, we're going to start with the childcare, and we're going to build the email list from that. Measurable, so you can measure exactly how that's going to work, because you know that there are 50 children in your group or whatever it is. So you're going to measure how you're going to do that. And you're going to measure it long term, in that you're going to see whether it's going to work, in that they will either use it or not. So you'll be able to see very quickly. So it's, again, it's not complicated, it's very simple. Attainable, is it, can you easily do it? Yes, you can ask them through a number of ways, and we get to platforms later on, we'll do that. But you can organize to get the emails and of all your people in the childcare. So it'd be building blocks. So start with childcare, move on to the next group and the next group. Relevant, it's certainly relevant to have them, and it's relevant to be able to use them. And timely, so you set your goal in terms of time. So if you were to sit down and say, I'm going to do this, if you say I'm going to do that this year, but there's not pressure on you to do it, but you may not follow through with it because you will find that you haven't put a timeline on it. So in terms of, say, that within the setting the SMART goals is that I will do it within the next month or 2 months. So we're getting near to coffee time, I think. Yeah, great, we're within time. So again, community example, I've just used that. And challenge 4 is write down your SMART goals. So what goals do you want to do? What is it that you want to do? And so do you want to start an email list? Do you want to get a website? Do you want to build on your community engagement and raising awareness? Do you want to start a fundraising campaign? Do you want to work with influencers, peer-to-peer? So you yourself and each organization will know what it is that you would like to do. Do you want to do a crowdfunding experiment? There's so many things within that that you could think about, but you need to sit down and write out your SMART goals on that. So we are actually, Karen, coming up to our break. We're just going to do a recap. So we now know what communication is. We know that we're all pretty good at it, but that we can work on getting better at it. The government at the minute is showing us best practice in terms of a communication plan and delivering it to a number of people and with their branding. And that's something I actually forgot to mention earlier on. People ask me in terms of brand. So when you talk about your story for your community group and social enterprise, a logo is important. Everybody needs a logo, but the brand is so much more than a logo. But yes, you absolutely need to have some type of visual attraction that people will know who you are and then go with your story. So I think now we're going to stop for coffee and questions. So over to you again. One disappointing thing, I suppose, about when we do an event like this over Zoom, we didn't get to all talk during the break to find out how you were feeling and how it's going, and was it as good as you had hoped it was, or did you get something from it? The other thing is, I always love the coffee and scones at the break as well, so I really missed that as well. So I hope you all had nice coffee and scones for yourselves. So again, just to recap, we know that we can all communicate. We know that we can be better at it if we work on the skills, and we hopefully now know what we should be doing in terms of crisis. We have looked at the fact that we should have a plan, no matter how simple or basic that is. And to begin, we must know what we're about. What's our story, our vision, our mission for the future? And we can have a look at some SMART goals. But now we need to move on to the who, what, where, and when messages in terms of communication. So who is your audience? So it doesn't matter, again, whether we're talking about a business, a community group, a social enterprise, all exactly the same. Before we start putting messages out, we need to know who are we talking to. And we need to give very clear call to actions. I often tell the story that if you have a teenager, and I'm sure a lot of you have teenagers in the house at the moment, so communication is probably good fun. And if you have it, and a disclaimer that I love teenagers. So, so basically, if you were to say to a teenager, I'm leaving now, but will you take in the clothes off the line, or something ridiculously simple, whatever it is. Unless you actually maybe give a direct message of, I am coming back at X time and I need you to do that because of whatever, that you've communicated with them with clear, and maybe what will happen if they don't. And so if you actually give them a clear call to action, the chances are they're much likely to do it. And it's exactly the same in terms of your message out there for business or for community or social enterprise. So first, let's go back to what we spoke about again in terms of the government message and the amount of people that they have to communicate to and the message that they have to get out there. So again, in terms of best practice. So in terms of our fictitious community organization, again, you have to work out exactly what the campaign. So for example, if you're thinking about a fundraising campaign, or you need to get out information on a day-to-day, or you need to communicate with people within your organization internally, you need to work out who they are. Now, if you have got a complete picture of that in terms of email listings or contact lists of every single person that you need to contact on any given on any day. So again, for example, if we go back to childcare, so if you have to send out the parents, or grandparents, carers of the child in the childcare facility information regularly, then they are one group of people that you have as an audience that you need to communicate with. And you need to then know what is it that you're actually going to talk to them about, what messages do you need to give them. There's no point in giving them an overload of messages, but you need to give them messages when they need to hear it, and you need to give them a call to action if that's what you need to do, and what they're going to then do with that. So it's important that within your organization you look at, in terms of, sometimes there's a board, there's then a committee. What's the communication with them? Who are the people that an ongoing month to month that you need to communicate with within your organization? And your volunteers, donors and sponsors, so, and business people that hopefully will help you in raising funds. These are also people that you're going to communicate to. So I think it's very important that within each organization you look at that and you look at who you need to communicate with. Also at this time, I would say that it is important to actually make connections. A lot of the people that you have communicated with may be at home. So for example, I'm thinking specifically in terms of business or funders or fundraisers, people that help you in your fundraising, or maybe people that have supported you in the past or sponsored you. Now is a good opportunity when you have time to actually maybe contact them and just say, listen, I just want to say thanks. We're doing a voluntary organization event in the community, and we just, we want to thank you for your support in the past. There's no problem in terms of communicating that with your supporters at the minute. So look carefully at who your audience is, and in terms of just make notes as to who they are and what messages you need to give them. So then we move on to what are your messages, and the key messages are the core messages you want your target audience to hear and remember. And again, so in terms of delivering a message to the people that you need to deliver it, you need to ask yourself the question is, do I really need to give this message today? Because I might have another message to give them next week, or I might have another call to action the week after that. So it's looking carefully at how you can do that. And I know Leah's here, and Leah from the base, maybe she's gone out the stage, and I know Leah has a monthly newsletter that goes out about what's on locally. And so maybe that's the thing, is that you send out specific messages to your target audiences for the specific things that you need to tell them, but then maybe have one overall newsletter or overall letter that you send out to everybody. So how to deliver key messages? Ask yourself questions. Is it believable? So if you're giving them a message, are you confident with what you're asking them or what you're telling them? Make sure your core message is supported by evidence. So again, depending on who you are actually delivering this message to. Is it easy to understand? Make your language concise, to the point, and use the correct tone. And I actually think what's really, really important is to use the language that the people you're giving the message to, that you're using the same language as them. I know whenever I started in 2013 in marketing, that there was an awful lot of jargon that I had to learn. And very quickly I realized that if you use the language of the person you're speaking to at any given time, if that's the language they use, that's what you need to use. So, and also it comes back to, we can see again the value of tone and the importance of using the tone. And is it positive? So again, it comes back to what we said, whether it's a time of crisis or general, the important thing is that you use the same rules apply. So to be positive within it. So if you wanted to, even if there was something that was a delicate situation that you had to send communication to people within your organization, is that you don't start with, this is terrible and you haven't done this and whatever, accusatory, so that you word it in such a way that it's a positive outcome for the group or the organization and a call to action. So in terms of, if you want them to do something as a result of the email or communication that you send them, you need to ask them. And it's the same when we talk later on about content. So the content on social media or the content in more traditional communication methods, you need to actually ask somebody to do something. And so many times we put a message or a communication out there and we don't ask. It's coming back to the teenager. If you don't actually ask them to do something, they won't do it. And is it purposeful? And make sure that your group, so that make sure that it's something that your group agrees with and that it sticks with the values and the missions. So challenge 5 is to create a chart with what message you're trying to get across and who you are targeting with the message. So again, time is on your side to sit down and say, who am I communicating with? And all the different people within your organization, both internally and externally, and how often so it might be a really interesting thing to create a chart, a very simple Excel or a text box, and just have along the side all of the different organizations or groups within your community. So say, for example, childcare. So it would be the mums, dads, grandparents, guardians of the children. So that's one entire group. The next group might be the gym members. The next group might be the youth group, and the youth group leaders. The next might be the elderly group that use your facility. So again, and in terms of social enterprise, your customers, and that is what, you know, in terms of business as well, because for each single one of those, they are your customers, inverted commas, customers, and their customer journey with you and your communications that you have with them will depend on the outcomes of what they give you when you give them a call to action. So if you want them to do something, you need to ask them. But first and foremost, we want to challenge you to find out who they are. And do you know? And yes, of course you do, because you're communicating with them every day normally. But actually, when you put it down on paper and then work out an overall plan, so could you communicate with all of them with a newsletter every month, or with emails going out every month, or do you need to specifically give different messages to each one? And that is pretty much what you will find that you do, because the messages that you've given one part of your group is not the same as you'll give to others. So we're going to move on now to, so we've looked at what your message is. Only each organization can decide that, what it is that you want to put out there. It could be in terms of fundraising initiatives. It could be about an event you're planning. It could be to promote your organization. It could be for new members. It could be volunteers. It could be to get the community behind you. Whatever it is, you have to decide what your message is. And then you have to decide who within your community you're going to communicate to, existing or new people that you want to attract. And also it's important to remember that you're communicating with people like Innishowen Own Development Partnership, like DLDC, and your funders, and that you have a responsibility to communicate with them in different ways as well. And just to be aware that with each person you communicate with, it will be a different tone, a different message, a different call to action. So now we're going to move on to channels of communication. And before we move into this is always such a huge topic. It's really a course in itself. So we're not going to spend time on each individual one, but feel free afterwards to ask any questions, or again, if I don't have the answers to all of these, we can get for you. So content is what is created when you are delivering communication message. And there are so many different places to put that. So on and offline are networking, building relationships, collaborations with influencers and others, and just deliver great content. And those are the things that you do regardless of whether you're a social enterprise, a community group, whether you're doing it offline, online. It's just, those are so important. It is possible to network online. We're doing it today. I host a coffee morning every Wednesday morning now on Zoom through Donegal Women in Business Network and Evelyn McMarketing, and it's networking online. We had somebody from Mayo joined it yesterday, and so you can do it on and offline. Building relationships the same, and collaborating. So old school or the traditional, which is still very, very important. And as I talk to groups throughout Donegal, and certainly from Donegal Women in Business Network as well, and we are a voluntary not-for-profit group, face-to-face is so important. Connecting with people, back to the same thing. Newspapers, there are some fantastic newspapers in Donegal and have been so supportive, and start building relationships with them and writing great content. And again, it comes back to the emails, what we discussed earlier. If you are sending out something that is great content for people that want to see it, read it, engage with it, then, you know, connect with your newspapers and do that. Radio, Highland Radio, and all the local radios, Ocean, and the local radios as well. Just, you know, sometimes people say, oh, they won't do that, or they won't. Like, send them an email, pick up the phone, communicate with them why you're doing this, believe in what it is that you want them to do, and ask. If you don't ask somebody and give that call to action, you will never know whether they will actually do it for you or not. So don't be afraid of it. A no is actually better than a, you know, just not knowing. Posters, flyers, still have their place, and again, within our community, perhaps not as much as they did, because there's still now a great digital platform, but also there depends on your demographics of who you're targeting. So for example, if you are talking about a great new bingo that you're putting on, there's certainly a lot of people that maybe are not on social media. There's lots of people on social media that play bingo, but there are maybe some people that you will find in the local shop, or your flyer or your poster at on a notice board in a shop. So events, exhibitions, God, can't wait to get back to them again. So I know there are some planned for later in the year in terms of local events and exhibitions for community groups, and we look forward to those, and they're a great way of getting a platform to communicate with people. And so again, we're communicating all the time. Whatever it is, we know the message and we know who we need to communicate with, and these are all the platforms for doing it. Pop-up signage, definitely, in terms of if you are going to an event, or even if you are now, when we move on to digital platforms, if you wanted to stand in front of a pop-up about your organization and do a video, then that's something that you can use in terms of you know, visually communicating. And post, we have definitely seen again a resurgence of communication within the post. Some people love them, some people didn't think it was a great idea. I personally thought it was really good and sent a lot of them, was the postcards that An Post made available. And that was a great way of communicating. I certainly sent to a lot of my aunts and uncles, and just to be able to communicate with people in the written word. So definitely don't rule out using post. Digital platforms, I mean, there's just so many. But to start off with, obviously there's social media. So we have all of the ones that we normally use. So you've got Facebook, and there's 6 different ways, at least. I think afterwards I was thinking, no, there's more than 6, even within Facebook itself. So you have Facebook putting up a post, you can do video, you can do paid advertising on Facebook, you can do fundraising platform, you can do the event, posting your event on that. You can have Facebook groups, and you can have Facebook stories. So even within the Facebook platform, if you were to master that and use that to promote your product, service, and call to action, then that's a great start. Instagram, there's exactly the same. You've got stories, you've got paid advertising on it. It's a different, all of these are different demographics. We find that Facebook, that the people that there's a female and of a certain age are using some platforms, and some are more general. But again, you won't really know that until you start building it, creating great content, and seeing who you're going to connect with and communicate with. And LinkedIn is more professional Facebook, I suppose, and there's a number of ways within that as well. You can do articles, LinkedIn articles, so you could have a presence on there, and it would be more professional. So rather than putting up personal stuff about your group or organization or social enterprise, it would be maybe something more professional. We've been put forward for an award, or we just took part in delivering X or whatever. And again, there's a paid. So with all of that, there is paid, earned, and free on all digital platforms. So again, it's to just look at each one that is important to you. So Twitter, so basically I am on all platforms but not necessarily active all the time on all platforms. And what I often say is that if you get a really good graphic done with your details, your logo and your information so that people can contact you and find out more about you, then you can put that, and in most of them you can pin it, put it up there and just go in and dip in and out. Stick to the ones that you know your followers and your community are going to engage with you on, and work with that, and then use the others as and when you need them. YouTube video, again, is huge, absolutely huge, and in terms of video generally, so it's a platform that you should really be looking at. And if you're not comfortable with it as the communications officer, or ask somebody within the group that is, and use the resources that you have. Two-way communication is the fact that social media has opened up lines of communication with your followers and customers, and communities are no longer messages on one side only. It's not just us giving out a communication message, but actually people now can come back to us. So, you know, even within Facebook and Instagram, you know, there are polls and there are all sorts of things that you questions that you ask and they reply. So there's just so many ways. Google Business is a fantastic platform for anyone in community. If you have a physical building with an address, so you can use Google Business, whether you're a social enterprise or a community group or a charity. And within that, you can put up your photographs, you can get reviews. It's free, and it really is in terms of search. So when somebody searches looking for what it is, your product, service, or whatever it is that you do, that if you're on Google Business, it does help with that. And just as regards that, for any of you, the term that is used in terms of search is SEO, which is search engine optimization. So it's just a fancy name for when somebody puts in something looking for something. Google Forms is something that you can use internally. That's very important. Market research. There's a thing called SurveyMonkey. So say you want to find out from your community group, from your followers, how they're feeling, what's happening, what new services you should provide. These are all free. They take a little bit of skill, but not much. Once you do it once, send out a few tests to some members of your committee or whatever, just to make sure that you get it right. But it's a great way of getting feedback and doing research. Emails, of course, is a great digital platform to send out, and we've spoke about that already. GDPR is important, but again, if you've been given permission and you've covered all the bases on that and stuck to the guidelines and governance, there's nothing wrong with that. And there is a thing called MailChimp. So basically, if you could imagine, you're gathering your emails and then you're putting them into a platform where you can manage them, do a newsletter and send it out. And again, they will show you in terms of opening rates and things like that. So yeah, it's important to keep an eye on that. But again, it's in terms of creative. And also in terms of content, there was two things that I haven't put on that. One is Pixabay, which has over 1 million free stock photographs for using to create content, and a platform called Canva, which actually, or PicMonkey, which also helps you create graphics for your social media or for any digital format that you want to send out. Again, if you have a graphic designer that will design one for you, I find sometimes as well that might work better because you could lose hours doing this. So this is all, there's huge, this is a course in itself, but this is just to give you basic and any questions we have. Your website obviously is a platform, a digital platform. The ability to blog on that, don't worry about blogging. Blogging is just like writing an essay or a story, which we were doing earlier on. And crowdfunding, which is basically a platform where you're communicating what it is, a particular project that you're interested in raising money for. But again, you're communicating and you're telling your story. So our challenge 6 to you is, what platforms do you use and do you think it's the right choice? And again, to maybe just sit down and look at what platforms you are using and how often you're using them. Are you using them effectively? And are you creating content? Great content is really, you know, people say, you know, what do I post? So you can post a video, you can post information about your committee or your community groups, or, so again, coming back to childcare, you could post something, the photograph, the drawings that the children have done, you could put something like that up, obviously not the children's photographs. depending again on your own governance within your organization. So there is endless amount of things that you can do. A video talking about your group, interviewing somebody that is using your group or your product or your service. And again, there's always the hope at some stage that you'll do something viral and that the video will be shared by many people. And, you know, it is, it's not impossible. And in terms of viral could be just in your local community, but that might be the only area that you want to promote the message that you're putting out on that particular thing. Again, in terms of social enterprises, all of those platforms, you know, the aim is, from a social enterprise point of view, is that you build your community, you build your business and service, you make money and with a conscience, and you're doing that. But also, it's important to think about e-commerce and selling beyond the hills of Donegal and our borders, and that we're selling all over the world with the product or service that we have. So your challenge there is basically, what platforms do you use? So, okay. And in terms of the product, the communication that you're using on all of those platforms is always include a call to action. So if you're sending out the communication to them, or you're posting content and you want them to do something, it could be like our page, share our page, comment below. What do you think? Ask people to engage. Don't sell. Tell them about things, create stories, and build relationships with these people. And likewise, very much in terms with work within your own peer support group in Donegal as well and beyond. So if you have met at meetings and you're all part of DLDC or Initial Development, the partnership is that connect with one another, share each other's content. You know, in terms of business, I always think it's very important for business people to support business people and to share their deals and their offers. And it's something certainly we do within Donegal Women in Business Network. There's no competition. You know, there's a healthy competition, obviously, in business, but there's no competition in terms of that we're all in this together, and like your organizations are. So support one another with your social media platforms as well, and events that are happening. Consider visual all the time. Again, as I said, I mentioned Canva, but be creative in whatever the different ways that you can be. Make sure that your message is easy to read and understand, again, on those platforms as it is offline, or as it is when verbal communication. So how to deliver, oh yeah, we did that, sorry. Yeah, so just in terms of being creative, I'm just going to give you one very quick example of something that I did a few years ago, which actually benefit community groups and charities. So I was working with Green Shoes, and they have 6 stores throughout the west of Ireland. And in terms of wanting to raise their profile and brand, I wrote a book called Green Shoes Saves Christmas, and it was a charity. So we actually sold it for charity, and there was 3 charities that benefited from it: Donegal Hospice, Pieta House in Limerick, and Galway Simon in Galway, because they have stores in Galway, Donegal and Limerick. So basically what happened was that we wrote the story, we had it translated into Irish, and this young girl from Monaghan, so there's a lesson in this as well, this young girl from Monaghan called Kaylee Cashel drew the illustrations for it. So first of all, in terms of the project, we got so much free publicity from doing this, because 1, it was for charity, 2, it was original and innovative, and it had the branding on it. So in terms of your group, your social enterprise, there is nothing to stop you from doing some type of project that will get and garner free media and free PR from people in Donegal generally, but also from the media. So, and this is basically what happened. iRadio actually came on as a free partner to promote this, because all the money was going to the charities, but also the fact that it was Green Shoes, and it's still, now if you put in search and Green Shoes Christmas, it will still come up. But also, this is a really good lesson, and you never know when you meet somebody what's going to happen down the road. So this lovely young girl was from Monaghan, and a friend of mine knew her and said she was a good illustrator, and she did the illustrations, and it was fantastic. And recently, about a year ago, somebody said, you know, Kaylee's done really well, hasn't she? This is now Kaylee Mua. She has over 500,000 followers. In fact, no, she probably has near to 1 million followers now. She's a makeup artist, and she travels the world. She works with the Kardashians. So she has literally 49,410 people like the fact that she had just bought this new car, which is a pretty cool car. But the point being is that it is important, if you work with people along the way, to be creative, to you just don't know around what corner your communication is going to work on. So before we move on to our final recap, I just want to bear with me 1 second. Yeah, so just in terms of creativity and communication, you know, come up with mad ideas and try them out. Join networks, be creative, and, you know, really in terms of your donors and your sponsors and businesses out there, they want you to connect with them and they want you to communicate with them, but they also want you to do something creative with your workings together and get their message out as well. So stand out, be innovative and collaborate. Know your target audience for your communication. Keep your communication simple and to the point. Learn to be a great listener. Avoid conflict within your communication if you can. And if you can't, manage it and communicate your side of the story and their side of the story. Create a communication plan, no matter how basic. And again, I honestly would say that, you know, take time to just scribble that down, because it really will help clarify and brainstorm what you're thinking. Set the SMART goals and know your channels, your paid, your earned, and your free. Respect the media and your customers and clients, because they are communicating about you in the community. So you want to make sure that they're saying something good about you. So, you know, again, respect that your followers and the people that you work with in your organizations will have comments to make. Strategic versus real time. So yes, strategize and have the plans in place, but work in the real time, and when crisis comes and communication needs to change, go with that as well. Create great content and tell your story. I mean, I can honestly say that in terms of platforms, it doesn't matter which platform you use or what you put on it, so long as you create great content that people actually want to see, and that's what gets results. Network with each other, with organizations out there, the ones that maybe that you don't even know exist, and with business and the community, and then measure. So basically the measurement, did it work? So if you do all of this, you're kind of saying, well, does all this communication, well, communication is happening regardless, it's happening, but if you make a little bit of effort to perfect it and to work within it, they're definitely, the measurement is easy to measure, because you will see, are you getting more engagement from your followers, both online and offline? Are people talking about your organization? Do people know what you stand for? Do they know what you're about? Do they know who you are? And the other thing I would say, you know, in terms of measuring, did it work? Have a look around and see who it is working for. In terms of, you know, the Food Cloud, I was just looking in terms, it's a social enterprise, and just what they're putting out there at the moment, and how much column inches both on and offline they're getting. So it's important, again, to remember that we're not reinventing the wheel. Communication is there. We're doing it all the time. We've done it all morning, and we will continue to do it. But I suppose it's just to actually put some effort and thought into how you're communicating, and that will link in with your fundraising, your sponsors, you're getting new volunteers, your fundraising initiatives and campaigns, and the sponsors and donors that you get money from, and your funders and your government bodies. Everybody wants you to communicate, and they want you to communicate well. So I think that's pretty much me. Challenge 7, share what you have learned with others. And that's something, I suppose, you are just one person, or maybe 2 or 3 people from one community group. So I would suggest that you go back in some form and send some communication to them and tell them what you learned, if you learned something. Also, from my point of view, I'm Evelyn McMarketing. I'm on Facebook. I'm on all the platforms. So send me a message, connect with me, give me a call. My details are everywhere. And if there's anything at all that I can do to help you, I'm happy to do that. Normally I would say I'm happy to meet for a cup of coffee anytime, you know, cup of coffee and a piece of cake. But so yeah, listen, thank you for your time this morning. I was nervous because I like to see everybody when I'm talking to them, and I like to, you know, get feedback. So, you know, I'm sitting in a room here just looking at a screen and hoping you haven't all left and gone. And so yeah, good luck with your communication. Thanks to Karen and John and everybody for having me, and take questions. Thank you.